I want to pray for, ask that we all pray for his mother, his family, and all of his friends who are in deep pain and shock still right now.
We go over the latest in the investigation into the shooting death of rapper Takeoff. What's happening behind the scenes? Retired Police Sergeant Alyssa Pinkelton comes on to discuss. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We wanted to talk right now about the latest into the investigation into the shooting death of rapper Takeoff, whose real name is Kirshnik Khari Ball. Now, as many of you may know, Takeoff was a member of the Grammy Award-nominated hip-hop group Migos, and this tragic event happened back on Tuesday, November 1st, out in Houston, Texas. And I should tell you right now that as investigations go, they are very fluid, they are very rapid. So by the time that you hear this recording, by the time you hear this show, things may already have changed, but we're going to get into what we know so far. As the evidence has been coming out, and primarily from video obtained by TMZ seems to show, there was another Migos member, Quavo, seen getting into a verbal dispute with someone, and Takeoff is right there. This is all happening outside of a bowling alley. Boxer Shakur Stevenson is there as well. And then only a few seconds later, you hear gunshots in these kind of rapid succession, and everyone starts running. And as we know, sadly, Takeoff was shot and killed. Others were injured as well. And at the time of this recording, no arrests have been made, but the Houston Police Department is encouraging anyone with any information to call them at 713-308-3600. Authorities had actually held a press conference after the shooting to discuss a little bit more about the case, and also, again, advocating for help from the public if they have any information.
It's Houston. Every brother and sister in the neighborhoods, I'm calling you to action, to step up. There were 40 people at least at this event, and people left possibly out of fear. I ask you one thing, and I want this to resonate with everybody. What if it was your brother? What if it was your son? You would want somebody to step up. So please step up, get the information to us so we can bring some closure to this family who's hurting.
So let's get right into this. I'm joined right now by Melissa Pinkelton, retired Metro Nashville police sergeant, who has always provided great insight into these kinds of investigations. Melissa, it's good to see you, and welcome to Sidebar.
Thank you for having me, Jesse.
Here's what we know. We know that Takeoff was shot and killed. We know two people were injured. There were at least two people who discharged firearms that night. There were two other people, as I said, who were hit by gunfire, but do not appear to have non-life-threatening injuries. This happened outside of a bowling alley. At this point, what do you think is happening behind the scenes in the investigation? What are authorities doing that we're not seeing?
Well, behind the scenes, the authorities are going to be very, very tight-lipped in this investigation because it's so high profile. So before they release anything regarding this, because of the high-profile nature of it, they're going to be tight-lipped. But what they're doing right now is they are in the evidence-gathering phase. And by that, I mean anybody who has video of this from their cell phone, because as we know, everybody records everything these days. And also, the majority of businesses around there will have video camera, and possibly audio, though. But we'll definitely have video. So they're going around collecting every possible video from every possible angle that they can at this moment. And they're also taking, I'm sure people are calling in tips, and they're also filing and fielding through those as well.
And this was a public event. So this was outside of a bowling alley. There were a lot of people. Do you get the sense, though, that you'd be concerned that people might not want to hand over information, right? I mean, I don't know this. We still don't know the circumstances of the shooting, but how do investigators weed out, false information? Because I'm sure there's people who are going to call in with not real facts about what happened, or maybe they have conspiracy theories, or they say they were there when they weren't. How do they weed out who to believe and who not to believe?
Well, they're going to take a lot of that information. If somebody just calls in something and says, hey, so-and-so did it, they're going to go ahead and start with the videos probably to see if they can identify that person being there. They're going to look up that person's criminal history. They're going to look up a picture of them and see if there's any way to match them. Then you could start possibly getting cell phone records involved and cell phone towers, subpoenaing cell phone records and towers. And so there's a bunch of different ways, but usually you can weed out the ones who are calling in false information rather sooner than later. And like you made a good point about people may not want to give up information. And I will go and I will refer to the biggest unsolved hip hop murders, Biggie and Tupac. So that is still to this day no one really has been accused or knows who killed Tupac, because there is this culture of snitches get stitches, for lack of a better. That's what they say, though. It's corny, but that's what they say. And so a lot of times, and I've experienced this as well, I'll show up to a shooting, and all of a sudden people will be gathered. We've gotten several 911 calls on it, and as soon as we get there, they're like, "Don't talk to the police. Don't talk to the police." Well, so that is a possibility that they might not get at anything and just have to rely on the video.
It's funny you should say that. We're actually covering a case on the Law and Crime Network. It's the Pike County Massacre case, and the people there, one of the witnesses said, she actually pled guilty to being involved in that massacre. She said, "We were always taught at a young age not to trust police and not trust the justice system. So it's not surprising you might have people reluctant to come forward." You talked about the video. So there is this newly obtained video from TMZ, and it appears to show a man who's armed with what appears to be a handgun. Not clear if he is the shooter, but he's standing quite close to Takeoff and Quavo. This happened right before the shots are fired. And what it appears to be is that he's seen raising the weapon and firing. But as I mentioned, there were at least two people who opened fire, so we don't know if he's the shooter. What are police going to do with that video and maybe other videos of that individual?
Well, there's several things that can be done. In the video, I saw the clip of the video, and you see the weapon. And so if they're able to zoom in enough and use the software that they have, which is pretty sophisticated these days, to identify the make and model of the gun, let's just say it's a Glock 9mm, just to throw that out there. If there are enough bullet fragments or a bullet that has been recovered from Takeoff's body, they would be able to, they can't see the serial number, but they would be able to take that bullet if there's enough of it and say, "Hey, this bullet came from a Glock 9mm. Now, in order to say it came from that specific one, you would need that specific gun, but that would be additional evidence to show that that person was the one who actually, in fact, shot Takeoff.
And of course, there's issues of whether or not it's actually registered to that person. Are you really saying that there's technology to enhance it? Because that appears to be a really grainy video. I mean, they were able to zoom in on that, or even take the bullets from Takeoff and match it to a specific gun. How precise can we get with that?
Okay, so what I'm saying is, so if we didn't have that, if you have that specific gun, if they recover the gun, absolutely, and they have enough fragments left from Takeoff, absolutely, they'd be able to match it. But if you didn't have that specific gun and they knew what make and model it was, like let's say it's a Glock 9mm, they could take the fragments and say that this bullet was definitely fired from a Glock 9mm. The technology is there. They can, when they have bullets, they know every type of, a lot of times cases work backwards. And so if you have a bullet and no gun or no idea of what kind of gun it came from, they can take it to the lab and say, and do the testings and say, "Hey, this came from a Glock, or this came from a Smith & Wesson." So yes, that technology is there.
And we also know that injuries that are sustained by someone can tell a whole other story as well, right? You know, where someone is shot can determine if something maybe was self-defense or an execution. The Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences in Houston conducted an autopsy, and they determined that Takeoff died from gunshot wounds to the head and to the torso. What does that tell you?
That tells me if somebody was looking to take out Takeoff, they accomplished what they set out to do. Because in general, when you shoot somebody in the head, you know that they're going to die. 99% of the time, a headshot is a kill shot. And also to the torso, because that's where the majority of our vital organs are. A lot of times is absolutely a death shot. And so that could have been a motive in this. That's possibly a motive. Another motive could have been, I have seen numerous times on calls where a dice game goes bad and a shooting breaks out. That's happened. That's a possibility. Or somebody could have felt disrespected. That's happened as well. But yes, a possibility is it could have been a targeted hit against Takeoff, and maybe a distraction was created, and so that they could create a situation where they had the opportunity to take the shot.
Right. Because there's no indication at this point that Takeoff was engaged in any criminal behavior or any illegality. So it could have been maybe it was a fight that blew up and he was just, a casualty of that. Because again, I'm not even sure he was part of the initial confrontation. Or, as you said, have you seen experiences where someone will create a certain environment? Obviously doing this in public, you would say, "Oh my gosh, why would you do it in public? There's so many witnesses, there's surveillance." But maybe there's a greater chance to show, if this was a targeted attack, say, oh, it looked like it broke out as a fight, or I was acting in self-defense, or it was so chaotic, it's hard to know who the real shooter is. Have you seen that before? Going into a public area with a lot of people under and what it really is a targeted hit?
I mean, yeah, that scenario I have seen before, and it's extra dangerous, but it's also it's kind of smart, because that way, if it's busy enough, and it more so back, years ago, when there wasn't so much camera footage and everyone wasn't filming everything. But yeah, what better way to get away with a crime than shoot somebody and then blend in with a huge crowd? I mean, that's one of the better ways to actually get away with something. But with the technology that there is now, I think it's going to be harder to do that, because everything is on camera. You step out of your house and you're on camera a dozen plus times, if not more, wherever you go.
Right. And by the way, let's just be clear. I mean, we don't know what the real circumstances of this shooting is. We don't have the full complete story. We're just trying to understand a little bit more about it. Melissa, before I sign you off, I want to know something to look out for. If police have identified the shooter, will they list an APB, his face on the news, and everybody searching for him? Or will they be more concrete about it? Will they be more quiet about it, more confidential, and try to locate him on their own? Because right now, as we said, the police are looking for any tips. At what point do they say we have enough, or we're not going to, reveal who he is yet?
If they have a concrete shooter and they know who the suspect is, the first thing they're going to do before they release it to the public is they are going to track down, because I guarantee, I hate to say this, but from personal experience, the majority of people who commit these types of crimes have a criminal history. So if they are able to track down who has done this, they'll probably be able to track down an address, possible location. If there's somebody else who was involved in maybe planning it or talking, hey, so-and-so might be here. The point they get to where they're going to release it and to the public to be on the lookout and say, hey, this is the person that did it, he's wanted as a suspect or a person of interest, is when they've exhausted all means on the inside of getting to that person. Because it's better to get to them without announcing it, because once you put it out there to the public, anybody and everybody that knows him and doesn't want him to get caught is going to be like, hey, they're looking for you, they're looking for you. So they're going to try and do it on the inside, on the down low first.
All right. So again, this is a continuing, developing investigation. Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time and explaining a little bit more to us. And we appreciate you coming on Sidebar.
Thanks, Jesse.
And thanks so much, everybody, for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.